Je commence de manière officielle, même si j'ai déjà dit bonsoir à tout le monde. Encore une fois, bonsoir à toutes et à tous. Merci beaucoup d'être avec nous. Je suis très contente et je pense que tout ce qui nous attend, c'est quelque chose d'extrêmement intéressant parce que aujourd'hui, on a une science qui va nous parler des musiques et notamment les musiques de rock et de pop russe et bélarusse comme patrimoine culturel. Ça, c'est quelque chose vraiment pas habituel du tout et je pense que ce sera extrêmement intéressant. And now I try a little bit in English. I think today we have very exciting and interesting communications because we will listening some things about rock and pop music as a cultural patrimony. It's very interesting, as minimum for at last for me and hopefully for all of you. And I think I must stop. And now it's the place for our speakers. First of all, I'm really happy to present you Alexandra Kolesnik, and the floor is yours, Sasha. Thank you.
So my talk today will be focused predominantly on Soviet rock music heritage in Russia and on one particular figure, on Viktor Tsoi. So it's titled From Grassroots Memory to State Appropriation, the Institutionalization, of Viktor Tsoi's legacy in Russia. But firstly, I'll start with a very brief overview of the very field of musical heritage research and some questions that we can observe in this field. First of all, this is very, very brief list of publications focused on musical heritage, predominantly in Anglo-American context, in Western context. But again, if you want to read something or to have like a starting point to understand maybe these debates about the very notion of musical heritage, maybe some of these works would be useful. So, popular music has increasingly become a significant part of cultural heritage in various cities, regions, and countries. As Amanda Brandalera and Susan Janssen note, while official definition of popular music heritage may be lacking, there exists a wide range of heritage practices encompassing preservation, exhibition, education, and remembrance that are closely connected to music fans, their commemorative places and practices, and their emotions. However, it often comes into conflict with official heritage institutions and their approaches to recognize something or to preserve something as cultural heritage, or appropriation and resignification of fan memorials. So musical heritage can thus be understood as the multiple ways in which the memory of the musical past of some particular musicians, bands, rock and pop bands, events, is materialized, represented, and transmitted. It encompasses spontaneous vernacular memorials and more formalized commemorations such as plaques or monuments involving both grassroots and institutional actors. And in this case, also, maybe it would be useful to put one other notion, heritagization, as a process of recognizing something valuable, something with this culturally valuable that could be understood as meaningful not only in terms of fandom and music communities like rock music communities, but recognized by official institutions. So, heritagization refers to the process of attributing cultural or historical value of specific practices or artifacts. It often entails negotiations over authenticity, authority, and emotional attachment. While typically linked to institutional power, heritagization also operates at the grassroots level through fans, local entrepreneurs, and independent curators who shape alternative memory practices outside state institutions. So the study of popular music and related cultural practices as heritage remains a relatively new field within heritage studies. Most research, as I mentioned, is focused on Western musical cultures and Western, understanding of musical heritage. And maybe one of the not fundamental, but very important in this field research, a very, how to say it, criticized paper by Les Roberts and Sarah Cohen, British scholars, focused on different ways of authorization of musical heritage. The substantial body of work has explored musical heritage in Western context, and the ways of how fandoms, musical communities, making sense of some musical events, musical figures, musical places, and their negotiations and different interactions, really different interactions with official institutions, not only heritage institutions like museums or I don't know, some other institutions, research institutions, like in case of Liverpool, for example. In most cases, research focuses on the authorization of musical heritage and the transformation, like the opposite side of this authorization, the commercialization, like for various fan memorials that become tourist attractions, fan collections that are turned into museums, and so on and so forth. Such examples abound from the Beatles Museum, Fan Museum in Liverpool, that was transformed to seated urban museum, official museum of the Beatles, or like, for example, Fan mural of David Bowie in London, which became a protected heritage site shortly after the musician's death in 2016. And again, these different ways of local conflicts and negotiations between communities, musical communities and fan communities, are becoming in focus of different research. At the same time, the political use of fan memorials is a second important theme. These are often linked to attempts to make a musician or a pop or rock band more visible and recognizable by official institutions in order to protect or to preserve these places. Or this is very political gesture aimed at marginalizing a particular figure for various reasons. A striking example in this case, from also Western perspective, Ian Curtis' grave in Manchester suburb. Ian Curtis, the lead singer of the band Joy Division, Manchester band Joy Division of late 70s. Who died by suicide in 1980. Throughout the 80s, his grave was a pilgrimage site for fans, which often led to conflicts with the cemetery administration. During that time, the band Joy Division achieved cult status, but Curtis remained a highly controversial figure, both due to his lifestyle and the circumstances of his death. Only in mid-90s did the cemetery administration make concessions for fans and add Curtis' grave to the cemetery plan. And in this case, again, these attempts of fans to recognize this place as a memorial site, not only connected to his particular life, but also to Manchester, the very interesting musical scene that shaped. That was shaped in early 80s, in Manchester, also became one of the argument for this recognition, recognizing Curtis' grave as a memorial site and also as a heritage site. And soon after, this particular place was added in very official and very commercial tourist routes around musical places all around Manchester. And these examples reveal how musical heritage emerged through tensions between affective devotion, cultural politics, and commodification, a framework highly relevant for post-socialist and post-Soviet context, with very criticism to both terms, post-socialist and post-Soviet, where cultural memory remains contested. In recent years, scholarly interest has expanded to include rock music of the socialist bloc, examining its cultural significance, historical narratives, and heritagization processes across Central and Eastern Europe. And also, this is very, very brief list of some research made in this field. However, in post-Soviet space, the study of popular music heritage remains really scarce. The political dimension of Soviet rock music, in this case, very complex, and as it seems to me, influences really a lot on these conflicts and struggles around recognizing Soviet rock music as culturally valuable and maybe meaningful in terms of heritage, and different ways and practices of fan communities to avoid this recognition. In 80s, as you definitely know, the Russian language rock music functioned as a countercultural musical scene and musical movement. It's also very controversial. I mean, in terms of research of Soviet rock music, but it's very influential part of self-description of music community, this countercultural context and this protest opposition to Soviet ideology. But by 90s, it became commercialized and integrated into political campaign. Most famously is Boris Yeltsin Vote or Lose campaign of 1996, featuring major Soviet-era rock bands such as Machina Времени, Nautilus Pompilius, and Alisa. The shift from dissident to co-optation forms of crucial backdrop to contemporary struggles over memory and institutionalization. This is again becoming very interesting and very complex phenomenon in the different ways of recognizing Soviet rock music, at least in Russia, as cultural heritage, and again controversies around this recognition, recognizing of Soviet rock music as cultural heritage. By now, there haven't been any major initiatives by state institutions to preserve Soviet rock music, with the exception of preserve and maybe to present Soviet rock music, with the exception of two exhibitions, Sverdlovsk Rock Club at the Ekaterinburg History Museum that took place in 2015, that was mostly focused on materiality and different artifacts and objects connected to late Soviet rock culture. So how music played, how musicians recorded, how they performed, and so on and so forth. And the other exhibition that took place in 2021, devoted to 40th anniversary of the Leningrad Rock Club, and took place in Russian Museum, in Russky Muzey in St. Petersburg. So it's very official institution that exhibited photos made by different representatives of late Soviet rock community in Leningrad and focused on everyday life and stage performances. Despite this gap in research and debates around the meaning of Soviet rock music, public interest in the late Soviet culture has grown significantly over the past 2 decades. In contrast, bottom-up memorialization and fan memorials, particularly around Viktor Tsoi, he's not the only one, but maybe he's the main example of this fun memorialization and recognizing something and someone as culturally valuable, has thrived, forming the most extensive fund-driven heritage network in the post-Soviet region and especially in Russia. So my presentation is part of the larger project, I hope so, on the heritagization of Soviet rock music in the post-Soviet space, especially in Belarus, Kazakhstan, Latvia, Russia, and Ukraine, with this focus on the figure of Viktor Tsoi and fan memorials and the transformation of meanings of these fan memorials on the one hand and political recognizing of this place on the other hand. So this particular presentation focuses on the state-driven authorization and militarization of Viktor Tsoi's fan memorials and Tsoi's legacy in recent years in Russia, and especially after the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So you definitely know who Viktor Tsoi was and is, I guess so. But briefly, he was the principal singer and songwriter of the rock band Kino, based in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. Their image and sound was based on the latest Western musical trends and combined British punk rock and new wave fusion, mixing the sounds of like Duran Duran, The Clash, The Cure, The Smiths, and this was a really huge part of their music and self-representations in late Soviet time. The lyrics of Kina songs covered both philosophical questions like loneliness, death, sadness, love, and sketches of Soviet everyday life. During the perestroika, again, as you probably know, Tsoi and the band Kino became one of the most influential and famous, and they even had their own concert manager and organized really professional tours around the Soviet Union, and not only around the Soviet Union. Tsoi was also played leading the role in the film Kazakh of the Kazakh director Needle, Igla, and maybe you know this film, maybe you saw this film, and after that he became the best leading actor of the Soviet best leading actor by the results of votes in the end of 1989. And so they played their last concert in Luzhniki Stadium in Moscow. That was also very influential and very important because they were the first Soviet rock band played in such big venue solo concert. And he died in August the same year in a car accident. Immediately following Tsoi's tragic passing, spontaneous fan memorials began to appear across numerous post-Soviet Soviet and later post-Soviet cities, expressing grief, love, devotion, bitterness, and love. Just one second. Yeah, these are just a couple examples how it looked like in the 90s. These are the main probably places, the so-called Tsoi Wall in Moscow, the Kamchatka boiler room. So this is the place where Tsoi worked in mid-80s. In Leningrad and Minsk, Tsoi Wall in Minsk, also very influential for the fan community in late Soviet time and post-Soviet time. So memorial walls appeared in many Soviet cities that either had some connection with his life, like in Leningrad and Moscow, or had active fan communities like in Minsk or Dnipro and Kiev or Smolensk. These are the same places. The photos were taken in late 2010s in case of Moscow and St. Petersburg, and in Minsk this year. I mean that these places, they still exist, as you probably know, and they are rather also influential in many political contexts. So numerous vernacular memorials dedicated to Tsoi have emerged across the post-Soviet space, serving as a powerful lieu de mémoire, if it's possible to use this particular notion in this case, that not only commemorate Tsoi himself, but also reflect the emotions, identities, and local histories of fan communities, again, in different local contexts. In Russia, Tsoi memorial sites remained predominantly fan-controlled and largely inaccessible to outsiders throughout the 90s. And as far as I know, not only in Russian case, but in Ukrainian cities and Belarus, at least in Minsk, these places were predominantly fan-based and predominantly for fans. But this situation began to shift gradually in mid-2000s as the early generation of fans receded and their influence over these spaces weakened. By the late 2000s, many Tsoi-related sites had fallen into disrepair, while others, most notably the Tsoi Wall in Moscow, became informal gathering places for marginalized urban groups, leading to tensions with both long-standing fans and local residents. The dynamics changed markedly in the early 2010s. Amid broad political transformations and a renewed wave of reinterpretations of Kina's songs. These reinterpretations, often linked to the emerging protest movement, occurred not only in Russia but also across other post-Soviet countries, signaling the reactivation of Tsoi's legacy as a vehicle of political and cultural expression. And this is also just kind of reminder about this political rethinking and usage of Tsoi songs, like in case of the solidarity movement led by Boris Nemtsov, Garry Kasparov, and Ilya Yashin in Russia. They chose the song Changes, Перемен, as an official anthem of this organization. This particular Son and the Son Grupa Krovi blood type was used during the protests on Bolotnaya Square in Moscow and during the March of Millions led by Alexei Navalny in 2011 and 13, and also became a kind of an official anthem of this protest movement. Very similar situation was in Belarus during the silent protests in 2011. And of course, maybe mostly more known during the protest in 2020-21, but Lizaveta will tell us more about also this political usage of Soviet rock songs, not Tsoi particularly, but also in the context of these political transformations. Very, I cannot say similar, but also political usage and reinterpretation of Tsoi's songs changes, перемен, was the case during the Euromaidan protests in Ukraine in 2014. And there are a lot of cover versions of this song translated into Ukrainian, like "Мы прагнемо змін" of the Ternopil rock band Sky, also became also, how to say it, very influential on the one hand. On the other hand, it started after these reinterpretations, negotiations and debates in the fandom community about this political usage of Tsoi songs rise in different national contexts, in Ukrainian and Russian at least, and not only. So, just one second. And what is also should be noted that in other contexts, in other post-Soviet space, Tsoi memorials, again, in this context of political interpretations as well, have sparked political debates and conflicts. In Minsk, for example, this Tsoi wall also became one of the places for political protests during 2020-21, and resulted the installation of surveillance cameras around this Tsoi memorial. And as it seems to me, this place remains really empty till now because of this guarding of the police and the surveillance cameras within this place. But again, Lizaveta will tell us more about Belarusian context. For example, in Kazakhstan, Tsoi vernacular memorials in Almaty and Karaganda have been subject to disputes over national heritage issues, as Tsoi starred in the Kazakh New Wave film Igla. And as you can see on this slide, the Tsoi monument in Almaty was installed not to Tsoi, but to the hero of the movie Igla, so the Kazakh movie. And there were a couple of issues and situations where when this monument was deinstalled and returned with this argument that Tsoi is not, so this is the monument again not to Soviet Russian language rock singer, but to the leader of the character of the Kazakh film and Kazakh New Wave movement in late 80s. A very similar situation was in many Ukrainian places, like in Dnipro, for example. The Tsoi wall in Dnipro appeared just soon after Tsoi's death in 1990, and it was assumed to restore this wall in 2022, but soon after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, as you can assume, of course, this initiative proposed by local authorities, not fandom community, but by local authorities, was stopped. And till now, as far as I can assume from conversations and debates in fandom community, the Tsoi was and is being renovated only by fans in the context of every year anniversaries of Tsoi's birthday and the day of Tsoi's death. So in Russia, the Tsoi memorials and predominantly Tsoi wall in Moscow are constantly war and are constantly the subject of political conflicts and clashes between city authorities and fandom communities and citizens as well. Any attempts to redefine or change the status and appearance of the wall by both city authorities and various activists have faced resistance from fans. For instance, in 2006, the art group Art Destroy, in their action against Tsoi's music, covered the wall with black paint, provoking anger and fear in fans and the general public alike. However, within a few days, the wall was again covered with fan graffiti and inscriptions. In 2016, a group of anonymous Moscow artists painted a large graffiti on Tsoi wall that read "Tsoi is dead," as an opposition to fans' phrase "Tsoi is alive," one of the first inscriptions of Tsoi on Tsoi wall in Moscow, not only in Moscow, in Kamchatka, in St. Petersburg as well, and became a kind of motto for different Tsoi memorials, these inscriptions, Tsoi is alive. This act of vandalism, as it was recognized by fandom community, was intended as a protest against the wall's continued existence in the Moscow city center. As you can assume, the next day the wall was again covered with multicolored inscriptions saying Tsoi is alive. And the similar situation was occurred earlier in 2006 with the memorial site Kamchatka in St. Petersburg. Faced with the threat of demolition of the house where Kamchatka is located, this boiler room where Tsoi worked in mid-80s, Kamchatka was officially registered as a museum and as a rock club after a campaign that gathered thousands of signatures with very emotional support of this place, not only as Tsoi's place, but also as a place of fan community. And using this argument that is very important heritage of late Soviet time and late Soviet local residents and musical community as well. Alongside the museum, a rock lab was opened in the former boiler room. When I talked to museum staff, the very last time I've been there in 2018, they said that most part of museum objects are from music community, like Tsoi clothes, paintings, documents, but many objects from the late 80s were brought by music fans, like, for example, this particular thermos that you can see in the left-hand side, on the left-hand side slide, that used to be a bottle for beer. And this materiality of late Soviet period, on the one hand, supported by local community, fandom community, and local residents, became a very, how to say it, not powerful, but very meaningful action and initiative by fandom to recognize, in their success, to recognize some places connected to Tsoi's biography as heritage sites, officially as heritage sites. So all attempts made by local authorities to beautify the Tsoi places, to restore it, to install a permanent monument, as it was proposed in mid 2000s in Moscow, or to control these places, were resisted by fans and city residents. However, Russian authorities have moved away from direct confrontation with fans and from attempts to change or destroy fun places. And again, as it seems to me, this shift started just after demonstrations on Bolotnaya Square, because when I conducted interviews on close to Tsoi wall in Moscow in 2014 and in 2015, I saw really a lot of young people who came to Tsoi wall in Moscow, who knew almost nothing about Tsoi, from their parents, for example, but they knew about Tsoi from this political context, from, Navalny recommendations, from this singing on Bolotnaya Square, and so on and so forth. And again, maybe it's too simplistic to see these links in the transformations of policy and politics, or official politics regarding particularly Tsoi. But again, these attempts to not to cancel, but to destroy, really to destroy these fandom-based memorials, and to how to say it, yeah, to let's put it like destroy, and maybe to resignify in a very neutral way these fandom-based memorial sites. They started to change in late 2010s and especially in 2022 after Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine. But again, this process started before. This it, so, for example, maybe I will give just one example or two examples. In 2022, a large-scale exhibition titled Tsoi, the Hero's Path, Tsoi, Путь Героя, was held in Manеж in Moscow. So this exhibition center near the Kremlin was organized by a grant from the Presidential Fund of Cultural Initiatives. This exhibition was opened in January 2022. I was on the opening of this exhibition with these representatives of this Presidential Foundation of Cultural Initiatives, who called Tsoi the cultural code of Russia. And Tsoi represented in this party was and is, because this exhibition is still going on, but not in Moscow, in St. Petersburg at the moment. Tsoi was represented there as very mythologicized, as myth, really. Different sides of one hero, Tsoi as a musician, Tsoi as an artist, Tsoi as a movie star, with very depoliticized on the one hand and decontextualized, really, because there were almost no links to late Soviet culture, to late Soviet political situation, to at least Leningrad rock club and so on and so forth. But again, these different actions, different sides of Tsoi. After the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the figure of Tsoi was repeatedly used by the Russian military forces to promote the Russian army through portraits of Tsoi in a modern Russian army uniform, as in case of this exhibition of artist Alexei Sergeyenko in St. Petersburg, who may be known for you as an artist who portrayed Putin and some other officials, or through the use of Tsoi's pictures during the rehearsal of the Victory Day parade in Moscow last year and this year. This I will play just this brief example from this year. And again, this is the rehearsal in May this year of the Victory Day parade in Moscow. And so on and so forth. I guess it's rather obvious. And predominantly two songs, Changes and Blood Type, were used last year and this year in these rehearsals. Lyrics of this song, I just want to remind you that lyrics of this song is actually anti-war and positions by Tsoi himself against any military actions, of course, in the context of war in Afghanistan and late Soviet Union. And Tsoi's family, his son, and the members of the band Kino was announced a kind of reunion in 2019 and have since held several concerts using recordings of Tsoi's voice with new arrangements, generally avoid commenting on the political appropriation of his legacy by either the state or the opposition. In interviews, they typically emphasize that Tsoi's songs were not political, citing Tsoi himself, like in this particular interview by the band's guitar player Yuri Kasparyan. On the Tsoi's father, who is alive, his mother died, by his father is still alive, has recently claimed that his son would have supported the war in Ukraine because he was a patriot. Most fans, however, support the depoliticized image of Tsoi, and others say in interviews Tsoi is not about politics, Tsoi is about unity and about peace. In recent years, Tsoi's music has also gone viral on TikTok, featuring in videos inspired by late Soviet aesthetics and the Soviet wave trend, attracting a younger audience, not only from the post-Soviet region, post-socialist region, but also from abroad, like South Korea, Japan, and so on and so forth. This depolitization of Tsoi's legacy, actively maintained by the band's members and supported by many fans, effectively facilitates the state's efforts to neutralize Tsoi's oppositional and Kino's oppositional potential. One of the latest stories surrounding Tsoi places happened this spring in Moscow. Maybe you know, and you know this case. Maybe you read some news about this case. In April this year, a large inscription "Technik" appeared on the Tsoi wall, and it was devotion and it was connected to the death of a very influential hip-hop singer Pasha Technik, Pavel Ivlev, who died early in April this year. And in response, during the night of April 12 and 13, artist Roman Yakovlev covered the inscription with posters featuring featuring an image of Tsoi making an obscene gesture along with the message, Pasha Technik is dead, Viktor Tsoi is alive. And this text in support of patriotic image of Tsoi. Yakovlev publicly condemned the inscription as an act of vandalism. In the following days, other artists joined it, painting over the Technik graffiti and supporting this patriotic image of Tsoi. In early June this year, the Tsoi wall was restored in Moscow. You can see also this picture in order to beautify this place, restored officially by local authorities, not by fandom community. And they beautified the wall and made this graffiti, how to say it, more beautiful. As you can assume, the very other day, the very next day, this wall was covered with new inscriptions in support of Tsoi and how to say it, neutralizing all this conflict between supporters of patriotic image of Tsoi and supporters of Pasha Technik. And the very last example, and I will conclude. Also, it's interesting because it's not supported officially, but it's an incident that took place just a couple of days ago around the orchestral rock concert that was announced in Tomsk in 2 days on November 6th. Promising to feature not only hits by Queen, AC/DC, Deep Purple, I mean some classical rock music bands, but also by Splin, Bidva, Zemfira, and Kino as well. So some artists who didn't support war and who moved from Russia, like Zemfira, who proclaimed foreign agents and so on and so forth. And however, likely following a denunciation, the repertoire was changed. And as you can also see from the screenshots, Tsoi's Kino's songs "Пачка сигарет," "The Pack of Cigarettes," and "Changes," "Перемен" were replaced by more patriotically and more officially recognized songs like "Blood Type" and "Star Named Sun," "Звезда по имени Солнце." So, to conclude, so today the Russian state is no longer openly suppressing fan communities, Tsoi's fan communities, but rather redefining Tsoi through a process of institutionalization. His legacy is selectively integrated in the national heritage discourse, stripped of dissent, repackaged as patriotic and aligned with the moral language of state cultural policy. Exhibitions, official portraits, and curated concerts exemplify this top-down domestication of a once oppositional figure, or used to be an oppositional figure. Yet institutionalization does not entail closure. Fans continue to resist through act of reappropriation, repainting, reinterpreting, and reactivating the emotional and communal dimensions of Tsoi's memory. Their practices preserve the vernacular vitality of Soviet rock heritage and Soviet rock music, even as state narratives attempt to monumentalize and neutralize it. Nevertheless, in Russia, Tsoi's fan sites and fan memory remain largely depoliticized, which creates a favorable context for the authorities to record him and integrate him into their narratives without commercializing him as in the West, at least now. While in many other post-Soviet countries, Tsoi's figure itself is associated with a multitude of local contexts and reinterpretations in Russia, again, the situation remains the same. But very interesting, very last example, sorry, it's really the very last example. Last year, Tsoi Center was opened in Novi Sad in Serbia, and this place is oriented, so it was opened by Russian migrants who relocated from Russia after 2022 to Serbia. And they consider, so they use, they coined the name Tsoi for this cultural center. So it's this place has nothing in common with Tsoi himself, of course. They have only in common this his name, but it's cultural center that organizes events in Russian for Russian-speaking audience, for some Ukrainians as well, but predominantly for Russian-speaking, I mean, for people who relocated from Russia, to integrate them, to communicate, I mean, within this community and to promote Russian language culture, again, with in very depolitical understanding of this culture, and in very, how to say it, fandom-oriented also understanding of Tsoi's music and maybe Soviet rock music. But again, this is very new case, and I need to learn more about this case. Thank you very much for your attention, and yeah, I will give the floor to Lizaveta.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Alexandra. And now I'm happy to give the parole to Lizaveta Lysenka. And now we will listen about the rock music in Russia and Belarus. Thank you. It's Alexandra, and for you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for invitation, and special thanks to Alexandra, because my research is building on the theoretical framework that Alexandra already introduced, and now I have a bit more time just to show the case and to talk about this case more. And also in opposite my case is pop music from the 70s. It's vocal instrumental band Песняры. It's a Soviet Belarusian vocal instrumental ensemble that exemplifies the complex interplay of Western, Soviet, and Belarusian cultural influences in Soviet pop culture and its contested post-Soviet legacy. The band formed in 1969, split in 1998, and their creative leader, Vladimir Mulyavin, died in 2003. Since then, the Belarusian state has become custodian of their legacy, turning it into heritage, and Песняры has become caught up in what Simon Lewis calls discursive wars. It's competing narratives about Belarusian national identity that selectively emphasize different aspects of the band's significance, in this case, the band, but these competing narratives reflect a broader split in Belarusian identity discourses. Discourse, as Nelly Beckers describes it, there are two versions of Belarusianness, official and alternative. They diverge on fundamental questions: which language, Russian or Belarusian, should Belarusians speak? Which historical periods matter? Is Belarus predominantly Soviet state, or is medieval and early 20th century past was the time when Belarusian identity was formed? And which geopolitical orientation and political orientation? Is Belarus closer to Russia and the current government is doing the right thing, or is Belarus a European state which belongs to democratic community of democratic nations? The official discourse insists on the Soviet past as the defining period of Belarusian history, while the alternative discourse seeks symbols and identity markers outside the Soviet framework. Heritage becomes central to the struggle because, as Laura Jane Smith argues, it has the power to either recognize or misrecognize individual and group identities. The 2020 democratic protests in Belarus and 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine gave this internal debate new urgency and regional context. Questions about whether terms like post-Soviet, post-colonial, and imperial apply to former Soviet states now fighting Russian imperialism, which weaponizes the shared past to justify aggression, are no longer abstract. Popular music may seem less serious than debates over decommunization or Soviet monuments, de-Leninization, and so on, but its hybrid nature makes it valuable material for understanding how the Soviet past continues to shape post-Soviet conflicts. My presentation explores conflicts around Pесnyry as national heritage of Belarus over the past 30 years, comparing contemporary reception to how Soviet audiences understood the band during their creative peak in the 90s, in the 1970s, I'm sorry. How are heritage practices involved in the transformation from Soviet to national identity in the case of Belarusian popular music is my central question. To situate Pесnyry historically, I need to briefly explain what vocal instrumental ensemble, or short VIA, were. VIAs in the Soviet Union they began as amateur bands playing jazz, beat music, rock music, but were later pretty fast co-opted by the state and integrated into Soviet music industry. They gained prominence in the 70s mostly, but declined in the 80s as independent rock bands, for example, Kino and others, became symbols of perestroika and glasnost, and VIAs became retro and symbols of old Soviet culture. Folk elements were vital to VIAs because Soviet nationality policy promoted traditional cultures, ethnic markers of under the label folk culture. By 1973, every Soviet republic had at least one popular VIA arranging folk songs for contemporary instruments, for electric guitars. However, this music, VIA's music and VIA's folk music especially, has very little in common with what actual folk music is. It's better understood through what Foster and Tolbert call the folkloresque. Folkloresque is popular culture's own perception and performance of folklore. Folkloresque products appear to derive organically from tradition, though they are usually bricolage. It's folkloric and invented elements consciously assembled to feel authentic. And the distinction between production of music and perception of music is crucial for analyzing Pесnyry in the Soviet period, because their music was not folk in production. It was, first of all, it was music that had authorship, but it was received as folk music. The folkloresque framing, musical motifs, visual aesthetics, journalistic narratives about this music made them legible as authentic folk within Soviet cultural policy. From the start, they presented themselves as Belarusian peasants on stage. This image evolved over time, from merry peasant songs to romantic medieval nobles to great patriotic war partisans. Pесnyry adapted markers of Belarusian identity to different narratives, packaging it as folk music while reflecting broader aspects of national culture, especially language and literature, becoming an early instance of distinctly Belarusian national pop music. I will show some collage of their songs over the years. It will take 2 minutes maybe.
la 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 la. Кинул ясь, как косить, кинул ясь, как косить, кинул ясь, как косить. Почем мамку просить?
Ты была сиреной, я теперь нелюдим. Я бы простил измену, если бы не любил. А где была вудица, а где был селязень, а теперь же яны над ним возеры. И нас ведет через траншеи окоченевшая вражда, штыком перерещая шеи. Бой был короткий, а потом глушили водку ледяную и выковыривал ножом из-под ногтей я кровь чужую.
It's like I need to say that this choice of examples, it a bit exemplifies how non-folk they were. They have more folk songs, little bit closer to what like folk music is, and like based on Belarusian folk music, but in general it's rather popular songs, and that's what like folk music was. It's popular music, first of all, and during the Soviet era popularity, Pesnery's engagement with Western popular music was neither openly recognized nor celebrated, even though obvious. Yet they were clearly influenced by British progressive rock bands and American jazzmen and blues musicians, and close to these genres rock bands such as Chicago or Creedence Clearwater Revival. These influences allowed them to depart from Soviet musical conventions. They incorporated, for example, rock opera, long instrumental passages, songs over 8 minutes long, and sophisticated vocal harmonies. They also adopted Western visual style in hairstyles, mustache, or even Western musical instruments. The frontman had a double neck guitar in Deep Purple style. This mix of folk elements and Western musical language within the Soviet music production framework created a highly original content. However, Central Soviet institutions often intervened in the creative process and controlled it. For example, album covers were often translated from Belarusian into Russian and printed in Russian language. Even the songs were in Belarusian. Having like union of composers could revise the repertoire and give them songs that they must perform, or cultural administrators of local and Republican and all union reshaped stage programs in every city. They could just ban parts of the program or intervene and say that this and that should go. But what attracted Soviet listeners most, according to diaries and memoirs, was exactly this originality. And young concert goers in their memoirs about concerts of Pesnery focused on professionalism, stage lights, emotional tension, musical skills of musicians, rather than just comparing Pesnery to Western bands. And Pesnery were not, for audience, they were not substitute for inaccessible Western music, because actually Western music was more or less accessible. And Pesneri were valued on their own terms. Officials, meanwhile, saw Pesneri as an ideologically correct version of music that is popular with the youth, and they allowed to play this at discotheque as popular music. But audiences that came for Pesneri, they were not just desperate for anything Western. They were searching for novelty and excitement that generally Soviet popular music sometimes lacked, but Pesneri delivered exactly this novelty. Soviet press coverage consistently emphasized what I call Soviet Belarusianness, and reports of journalists highlighted Pesneri's patriotic songs about partisans and how the band visited great patriotic war memorials. Another common theme was their careful treatment of authentic Belarusian folklore. A claim that musicians themselves reinforced in interviews, yet band memoirs reveal a creative process that always prioritized innovative sound over any folk authenticity, as you hear from examples. But the Soviet press constructed a narrative that Pesneri's sound represented Belarus' ethnic character rooted in traditional melodies. Even at their peak, Pesneri still faced criticism when they were deviating from these folk themes. They were criticized for weak lyrics, excessive theatricality, overly complicated concept albums. Soviet critics claimed they were straying from their established rules, so producing accessible folk music. And when they were straying from that, they were criticized. And when they were producing something folk framed, they were praised. This reception shows how Soviet Belarusianness was constructed mostly through official media conventions, so like what Yurcha calls authoritative discourse. And understanding this reception is important because it explains why the Soviet band so easily became Belarusian national heritage. Because Pesneri oriented toward multiple audiences, listeners, authorities, media, and each of these audiences assigned their own different meaning to this fusion of Western Belarusian and Soviet. The band did not survive long after the Soviet collapse, and the story of original Pesneri ended with Mulavin's death in 2003. Yet many successor bands continue contesting their legacy, and this whole process of heritagization demonstrates how music can become a representation of the past instead of a living practice. And here are some examples. In 1997, young Belarusian rock musicians produced a tribute album Pesня Rock, reimagining Pesneri's songs as punk, grunge, and hard rock. This early heritage practice was approved by regional members and highlighted the contrast between Pesneri's Soviet sound and contemporary Belarusian rock, while establishing continuity between them. Pesneri became fathers of the Belarusian rock scene without distinguishing between their Soviet or Belarusian dimension. Folkloresque elements were set aside. And at this point, heritage was not yet contested because the band members still controlled their own legacy. But Pesneri had already transformed from just bearing markers of ethnic identity to being a marker of national Belarusian identities themselves. I hope to show this video. But final transformation into heritage began after Mulavin's death in 2003. when the Belarusian state intervened to establish its own narrative of the Soviet past and Belarusian culture. The emphasis became Sovietness also redefined as a relationship with the Soviet successor state, Russia. In 2004, Lukashenko wrote a foreword to the book about Mulavin, highlighting how this Russian-born musician contributed to the image of proud Belarus. Lukashenko helped re-establish the band without original members as the Belarusian state ensemble Pisnery, which now holds the copyright for the band's name. And the state ensemble performs at official festivals and represents the brotherly Belarusian Republic at official celebrations in Russia. The official biography of the ensemble on their website tells only Mulavin's story, erasing input of other musicians of the band, many of whom are still alive and performing Pisnery songs. This erasure was necessary to prevent alternative visions of this heritage. In the state narrative, only Mulavin, and by proxy the government, preserving his legacy, has authority to define what Pisnery means. In 2004, there are also a lot of memorial practices from the state. In 2004, a boulevard was named after Mulavin. In 2006, a memorial plaque made by a Belarusian sculptor was installed in Yekaterinburg, Russia, Mulavin's birthplace. Also, there is a plaque on Minsk address of Mulavin. In following years, the Belarusian state also renamed two streets after Mulavin in Belarusian cities, issued a post stamp with his face, awarded him posthumously with the presidential award, opened a museum of his name, and co-produced a TV series about the band. Another example is paired monuments in Minsk and Yekaterinburg, erected in 2014 and 2017, respectively. Officials from Russia and Belarus hold annual ceremonies at the Minsk monument, presenting it as a symbol of brotherly peoples united by Pisnery music. And there is the contrary process of using Pisnery's heritage and identity discourse, which continues through the efforts of representatives of the Belarusian independent music scene. In 2009, Experty By, a website reviewing new Belarusian music, published professional reviews rating every Pisnery album. The experts declared that Pisnery created contemporary Belarusian music, transforming it from a local scene into an international phenomenon. And the reviews emphasized Belarusian elements, language, history, literature, while attributing weaker material of Pisnery to Soviet influence. They repositioned Pisnery within Western progressive rock canon, separating them from other Soviet vias, highlighting that they are unique phenomenon in Soviet music. Reviewers identified Western influences and connections, sometimes even anachronistically, for example, comparing their 1970 song to the sound of the band Portishead, which was founded in 1991. They cited English language progressive rock fan websites that rank Pisnery among the best of the genre. The reviews also acknowledged the Soviet dimension of Pisnery, but expressed a clear preference for their Belarusian marked material. Criticism was largely directed at the main hits written by Soviet composers and songs that adhere to the conventions of the Soviet pop. However, the folkloresque imagery was not critically examined by the independent reviewers and was treated as unquestionably authentic, despite being actually Soviet-invented tradition. This reframing continued and was contested with the 2014 tribute album Re Pisnery. According to its inspirators, the main aim of the tribute album was to rethink Pisnery's music and place it within a new contemporary musical context, the same as the first tribute album. The main requirement for participating musicians was that songs must be in Belarusian. This included many popular hits of Pisnery. Some covered songs carried political weight as their lyrics served as protest anthems since the 90s in democratic Belarusian movement. The tribute implicitly opposed state heritage discourse, demonstrating Pisnery's potential for political reinterpretation. However, independent journalists gave mixed reviews. While praising the alternative approach to Belarusian heritage, they noted weak production quality and lack of conceptual coherence. Here's the visualization for this.
Скажи им, что гимн не кладется на музыку. Быть нормальными – идеал неудачников. Народиться тут по змовчанні значить не думать інакш, чим повинен думать. Не наракать на впливи подій. Бяжим від людей і обставин. Скажи їм, нічого не буде на некалькі чвертів життя чекання. Пообяцай мені усе, що завгодно.
Yeah. But former Pesneri member, composer Alexandra, also composer of the song Malitva, which will be mentioned later, responded to this tribute album by filing a copyright lawsuit, claiming the covers showed low performance level and lacking professionalism. Other former band members supported him, and 4 songs were removed from the tribute album. Notably, the 1997 tribute, also of amateur quality, as you've seen, provoked no such claims. Here, Sovietness is expressed as professional standards from the Soviet time became justification for gatekeeping alternative identity narrative. And the 2020 protests marked the next key moment in the struggle over heritage. The symbolic imagery played a unique role in that political confrontation, as demonstrated reinventing national identity in opposition to Lukashenko, who portrays himself as the father and founder of the nation. Rock music dominated the soundscape of protests, including Tsoi's songs, yet Pesneri's songs were also present. The pre-existing heritage infrastructure with this accent on the importance of Pesneri enabled repurposing for political struggle despite the authorized heritage discourse. Here's the video how the senior protesters dance to the Pesneri hit. In this case, the Soviet past became not collective national history, but just recollection from individual living memory. Personal memory confronting the regime in this case reconciled Soviet and Belarusian elements by using this music as intended for fun, for singing and dancing. Another song, Malitva, sparked a lot of debates in internet about Soviet legacy between regime supporters and opponents, because both of them recognize it as a national anthem of sort. Seekers across Minsk during the protest showed Mulavin's portrait, asking, "Would you raise your hand against the people's artist?" And this Soviet honorific was reframed, "The artist with the people, not the artist of the state." And such performative practices show the use of heritage outside of antagonistic discourses, bridging Soviet and Belarusian identity by individual memory of belonging to the both imagined communities. However, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine raised new questions about reframing Soviet artifacts without critically examining Soviet culture's impact. The state ensembles, Pesneri support for regime politics, and former members of the band appearing on Russian TV complicated further interpretation. And for example, in 2025, Malitva, this important alternative national anthem, was performed on the state TV's Marathon of Belarusian Unity by a trio which included Lukashenko's son Nikolai on piano. So So here it is a performance of how state sees Belarusian people all together, without mentioning the ongoing political repressions. And Vladislav Misiewicz, Pesnery's oldest living member, proudly shared this video on TikTok, commenting that this is the real band's inheritors. So, concluding, the protest, the political use of this heritage demonstrated that Soviet culture can be separated from state narrative as heritage, and that post-Soviet can be absorbed also into democratic Belarusian national identity. But contemporary debates, they either focus on Westernness of Pesnery, highlighting it as a European identity of Belarus, or omitting its existence as if these influences were invented by Pesnery. And both discourses who claim Pesnery's heritage avoid the question of coloniality, post-colonialities. And it's a question of distribution of power. Who had the power to define what is Belarusian in this music in the first place? So for future research, understanding Pesnery requires examining not just what markers of identity they displayed, but who prescribed those markers and in which constraints of Soviet culture and power structures they formed, which nowadays heritage discourse avoids. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope it was not too long.
Thank you. I think now it's the time to the questions.
Thank you very much. Well, let's go to question.
Yes, thank you very much for this fascinating presentations, which somehow echoed one to another. And what I found fascinating in both presentations is how polysemic can be this legacy, since they can be appropriated and heritaged by quite opposite group of people. And my question is to Alexandra, because I was really surprised. I was not aware of this appropriation of Tsoi by nationalists and by the state, because I cannot understand what in his songs and in his figure can inspire these people. So can you please? I can imagine what inspires in Pesnery, but in Tsoi, really, I cannot imagine.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. It's a really good question. I also have this question in my mind, observing different news about the usage, like pro-state usage of Tsoi songs. But again, this, as it seems to me, this process started not in February 2022, but really soon after Bolotnaya, protests on Bolotnaya, from mid-2010s, because I could not include everything, I mean, in one small presentation, but if we follow different events, festivals organized, at least as far as I can observe from my perspective, in Moscow, I mean, in St. Petersburg, in Yekaterinburg as well, I mean, in different big Russian cities, Tsoi was represented in these events, festivals, I mean, organized by different institutions. I cannot say pro-state institutions because, for example, in 2015, it was a huge festival in Moscow, next to Moscow State University on Vorobyovy Gory, Vorobyev Mountains, with devoted to the celebration of it's like the city's day, how it's correctly in English, the day of Moscow, in early September, and one of the mottos of this festival, it was So let's of course, let's be proud of something, let's be proud of Moscow, let's be proud of our history. And Tsoi was included in this repertoire, in this lineup, I mean, his songs, the cover of his songs, but predominantly Kukushka, Blood Type, and Звезда по имени Солнце. I'm thinking, I'm trying to recall how it correctly in English. The star named Sun or something like that, how it's correctly in English. And this step by step, on the one hand, depolitization, on the other hand, making Tsoi and his songs, some particular songs, not all of his songs, but some particular songs, like this patriotic playlist that we saw at the very end of my presentation, if it's possible to call it patriotic, so-called patriotic. I mean, the usage of his songs without any context, without any meaning, but the usage of the very figure, very famous, very well known in different Russian cities, not only Russian cities, I mean, on the post-Soviet region. So the usage, the name, but without, not even critical, without any digging into the lyrics, the meaning of the lyrics. Decontextualization, total decontextual, as it seems to me, total decontextualization of his songs. But now this Blood Type song, and it's very controversial because really a lot of fans, they, how to say, do not understand this patriotic usage of the Blood Type song because it's really initially anti-war. And Tsoi didn't comment so much about this song, but during the interviews that he gave in late 80s, he was asked a couple of times about his anti-war position, against war in Afghanistan, for example, against war in general. And he usually commented that my songs not about politics, my songs not about state or against state, not about against war, I mean explicitly against war, particular war, but against war in general, they are for peace, for unity, and so on and so forth. But even this meaning was neutralized, as it seems to me, in this official and state appropriation and reusage of Tsoi. So they use the name, the symbol, and they trying to fulfill it with some patriotic meaning, maybe pro-state meaning, but not actively as it seems to me right now. Because again, fandom and music community like Yuri Kasparyan, they do not comment on this, and they do not support this political and militarized usage of Tsoi, and they do not comment on the very usage of the figure of Tsoi, the name of Tsoi in these actions. They just prefer to stay outside, and fandom community also prefer to stay outside these different negotiations and reinterpretations of Tsoi. But this unity among fan community is very obvious while attacks on Tsoi memorial sites. Not songs, not the meaning of songs, not the meaning of musical lyrics, but the sites. Yeah, Bella, I hope I answered your question.
Thank you very much.
If there are no questions, may I ask Lizaveta a question also? Because I do not remember if we discussed it previously. We discussed it briefly, but I do not remember the details. I know about Pisnery from the Yekaterinburg perspective, because I collected some data there, and for Yekaterinburg-based, Sverdlovsk-based Soviet rock musicians, Mulyavin, for some of them, not for many of them, not for all of them, but for some of them, Mulyavin, he's the father not only of Belarusian rock, but Sverdlovsk rock as well. And they try to promote this Sverdlovsk identity of Mulyavin and Pisnery as well, because it's a part of some exhibitions they organize in Yekaterinburg. It's also the part of this Sverdlovsk rock musical instruments museum. So it's it's officially a museum. It's this is a small exhibition based in the cultural club of Uralmash, this neighborhood where Mulyavin was born, where he grew up, where he rehearsed, where he started his musical career, and so on and so forth. And they installed there a memorial plaque to Mulyavin, the first Ural-based, Sverdlovsk-based rock musician. And after that, Belarusian, of course. I'm interested about the usage of this Sverdlovsk-based site of Mulyavin. Are there any links? Are there any, I don't know, not debates, links to his Ural identity and his experience there? Because he covered Beatles there, and he was very famous for his early musical experiences there. So is it somehow reflected in your cases and in different debates around Pisneri?
Mostly not. So I suppose it's also like the interest of both discourses of everyone who involves Pisneri's heritage and this like role of Mulyavin as a leader, as a frontman, as an idea, as an inspirator behind like genius music and innovation, so on, so on. Everything that there is. They are mostly interested in this very huge, very vague national identity. There are always this discussion that's like he's Russian with Belarusian soul, but it's always on the national level. It's never like how the place of Yekaterinburg influenced him. It is very little known usually. It's usually not highlighted in biographies, and mostly it's the only thing that's what like stigmatized is like vice versa is Belarusian, mostly in this course of alternative Belarusians. People suggest that he had Belarusian roots because Urals and all this like far Russia is a place of exile of Belarusians in the late 19th century and middle, all the time of Russian Empire, and also a lot of Belarusians were deported there during the Soviet time in the 20s and the 1939, which would be too late for Mulyavin, who was born in 1941, to have this deportation routes, but nevertheless, like the idea is that he is the only thing that is discussed, that he is Belarusian who like occasionally was born in Sverdlovsk. So what's more interesting, like there were enough. He was not the only Russian member of the band. For example, Vladislav Misevich was born in Orenburg. And Misevich is also a very important figure for Pisneri. He was the only person who was there from 1969 to 1998. He was the person who split the ensemble. He was the person who said, okay, I don't see that Mulyavin goes the right way. It's like, I cannot agree with this. Let's split the ensemble. I'll try to revitalize it. And he's still very prolific in this, like, he's writing memoirs. He has this TikTok page where he posts about Pisneri and his experience of being in Pisneri and so on. And he also does not thematize local identity in any case, and they do not see, like also Pisneri members, they do not see any inheritance, any connections to Russian rock music. Because also like Russian rock music, all this like Sverdlovsk Rock Club, Leningrad Rock Club, they replaced all vias in this in being interesting for youth culture, as being youth culture icons, because in the 80s when all this rock music was on their peak, we as well ready music for old people, for people who are older than 20. So it's not a topic at all. What Misevich says about himself, that he's Polish. and who occasionally was born in Orenburg. And but also he's actually he has this roots in he's Vladislav Ludwigovich, and his father is Ludwig Misiewicz, and so on. He traces this genealogy in autobiography, but still no interest to Ural places at all.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, occasionally it's it's perfect. I mean, in these self-representations.
So thank you very much for your presentation, and I have a question for both of you. So your studies hugely deals with the exploration of fun communities, but I suppose that that now it's rather difficult, and that the life of fun communities is not so intensive as as earlier. How do you resolve such problem, and what the situation is, and what the problem with the study of the non-authorized heritage discourse do you have? Thank you.
Lisa?
I don't know. It's like in my case with Belarus, it's yeah, it's difficult because the fan community also experiences the silence and repressions as a lot of population of Belarus. And it's I would say that it's difficult to study, not even because I do not have like direct access on site, but it's difficult to study because nowadays authorized heritage discourse is supported by the states, by the state also in very physical physical dimension of being able to silence the opponents. And mostly in my case, I would say it is still possible to see what's like and to speak to people who are in exile, which is also a huge amount of people who were involved in preservation of like or creation of semi-authorized or non-authorized heritage discourse. For example, all the organizing of these tribute albums, they are now activists in exile for Belarusian culture, activists in some organizations. And but also like in my dissertation, I'm which also like deals with these questions of pisniri and identity. I mostly deal with historical sources, and I'm more concentrating on the 70s, 80s, and more or less like the roots of these entanglements, not on their contemporary results, so to say.
Yeah, in my case, it's also, of course, not so easy to get to fandom community. And in case of Tsoi, it's also a huge question. What is fandom community? Because it's transformed and changed really a lot since Tsoi's death. I talked to people in St. Petersburg, in Kamchatka. I mean, to those people who were among this young audience who overnight after Tsoi's death on his grave in Kamchatka and so on and so forth, not so many of them still alive because of rather obvious reasons. And as I was told by, she was a museum keeper and bar woman, double roles in Kamchatka in 2013 or 14. So it was, yeah, it was almost more than 10 years ago. Yeah, and she told me that really less and less people of her generation, she was 50 something at that time of her generation coming to this place because again of age and so on and so forth. But a lot of young people were coming to Kamchatka and still coming. So, if to be brief, on the one hand, I do follow debates online, of course, in different Tsoi communities in Vkontakte, but we can assume that, of course, people who have this account on Vkontakte can join these debates and this conversation and so on and so forth. Not all people have this Vkontakte account, but there is still really huge community that unify people based in Ukraine, for example. And it's impossible to check it. I just can ask people who uploaded this video. It was a video uploaded there from Tsoi Memorial in Kiev this year. There is a so-called Tsoi tree in Kiev. It was officially recognized as a heritage site that was promoted by local authorities in 2021. Yes, in 2021, and it was established as a heritage site in early 2022 before the full-scale invasion. It's a so-called heritage tree, Tsoi tree. It's a tree that was represented in the movie The End of the Vacations, Konец каникул, filmed in mid-2080s, and Tsoi was also one of the leading, I cannot say actors, because Tsoi played himself in this movie. It's a short movie. It was a movie directed by Ukrainian director. It was a kind of his graduate work, very, very simple, but very funny, like 4 small video clips. And this tree was one of the main locations in this movie. And in 2021, it was recognized as a heritage site of natural heritage site, but it wasn't officially called Tsoi tree. And a memorial plaque called Tsoi tree was installed at that time. And as you can assume, it was deinstalled in March 2022, just soon after full-scale invasion. And some people who live in Kiev, they still organize Ukrainian-speaking and Russian-speaking audience, but again, I cannot assume, how many people in this community. They still organize these commemorative actions on Tsoi's birthday and the day of Tsoi's death. And this year, some of them uploaded also a video commenting how people live there, how people want to commemorate Tsoi, despite his son in Russian, despite he represented Soviet rock music, and so on and so forth. So again, it's still possible to find people through online communities. There is a huge forum also devoted, couple of forums devoted to Tsoi. Some of them dead, some of them still alive. But again, it's still possible to reach some people. Of course, it's very uneasy to reach young audience because they do not go to these Vkontakte groups and forums and so on and so forth. But they are, many of them, I cannot say they are rather active in these Soviet wave groups devoted also to Soviet style videos inspired by late Soviet Union, the new rock bands, and so on and so forth. So I'm trying to combine different online communities devoted to Tsoi directly and to Soviet retro wave sorry movement. It's on the other hand. On the other hand, there are really a lot of people relocated, and some, as I mentioned, some new places appeared, like Tsoi Center in Novi Sad in Serbia. I was surprised to know that new Tsoi wall appeared in Poland in 2023 in Toruń. And this Tsoi wall was made by Polish musicians and Ukrainian refugees from, as I can assume, from eastern part of Ukraine. So what I'm trying to say that I cannot say I cannot speak about fandom of people who migrated from both Russia and Ukraine, but it's also very interesting communities, let's call it in plural, because it's different communities. And yes, it's possible to reach some of these people through thematic events devoted to commemoration of Tsoi and through some rock concert as well, through online or to visit these places. Again, if I applied for research grant and if it's approved, I hope to go to visit some of these places in Serbia, in Kazakhstan, in Latvia as well, and maybe to speak to these people. But it's a huge question, who is fan community, the Tsoi fan community? For me, it's a huge question at this moment. Sorry for such a long answer. Answer.
I would like to ask about Песняры. There is a film, it's from 2022, about this group. He is directed by Russian producers. So I would like to ask if you have any interpretation of this film, or if this film give us some key to answer your problematic of your presentation, maybe?
I'm not sure. Do you mean the TV series? It's like it's several series and it's called
Yes, it calls
half an hour before spring.
Yes, this one.
Yeah, it made quite a stir in the Belarusian community on both sides. It's Russian-Belarusian co-production, and it's going back very much to the Soviet framework of cultural production in which Песняры worked in the 70s, when it's like central resources are used, but Belarusians decide what they want to show, depict, and how. But then, like central resources, I mean, like Russian resources, people who distributing them, they interfere and say, "Oh no, here we should, here is the stop line," and it's it requires a different paper. So which I one day will write, but I don't know when. Mostly what's most interesting, but considering the problematic that I spoke today, it's maybe two things. First of all, that it's still, it's of course authorized heritage discourse. It's part of it. The most prominent thing about this could be the fact that one of the actors was cut, not really cut out of the series. He was, after the series was already published and after post-production, his face was blurred because he was participating in the democratic protests in 2020. And he was playing one of the musicians. So I think he was playing the drummer. So it was not the role that they could cut completely. They could not, because of the resources, they could not like refilm it and make a new post-production because it's very expensive. So they just blurred him because Belarusian side of the production said, we cannot give access to heritage to people who have wrong political views. Because then it could be like such people could like reinterpret heritage in the wrong way. And maybe the second part, which is interesting in the series that I can address now, is the role of power there. The best character in the series is Petr Masherov, the secretary of the Communist Party of Belarus at the time. And if to see the series, it shows the history of Pěsněry more or less close. So it's not fantasizing too much. But the most interesting part is to see how the figure, this one leader of Belarusian state, how it's the most positive and influential and kind and giving figure who always patronizes the musicians and helps them to to deal with all the troubles. And maybe that's what I can say about this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe first, Irina Veselova, your question, and then a question of Irina Zhitnikova in the chat. Yeah?
Okay,
Irina,
thank
please.
you. First of all, thank you very much for your presentations. Very interesting. I have two questions, one for Yelizaveta. You mentioned that the musical heritage of Pisnary could be considered as an artificial Belarusian culture, created by the government. But as I understand, it's also to some extent based on real Belarusian roots. Yeah, did they use some real Belarusian culture? Should we separate it or not? And my question is, what consequences had this representation for Belarusian people, and maybe still have? And the question for Alexandra, or maybe just comment, after your presentation, I thought that Tsoi is for everyone, just because he's dead. Because we wouldn't have this situation if he was still alive. And it's interesting because I wouldn't say that there is some homogeneous fan community. No, we can't say this. There are a lot of groups, people who remember Tsoi in their own way. And the most interesting part that his heritage is still in the process of changing, because Kino released their album this year, new album, 25 years after the death of the lead singer. So, and John Stingray also had a lot of projects this year. I think this history is her actions, and the myth of Tsoi is still alive. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe I'll begin. It was the first. Thank you very much. It's like this question's very prolong my paper, and is very helpful. First of all, I should say that I don't mean that it was like fully like artificial culture. I mean, it's just like the implications of my theoretical standpoint, where everything is artificial, everything is constructed. I just look how exactly it was constructed, because especially in this, I'm talking about this complications between ethnic, national, and Soviet in Soviet nationality policy. In this regard, absolutely everything was constructed. There was not. It's not possible to say what is authentic, what is like implied from above by Soviet power, because it was very convoluted process. And what I mean is that it was that invented tradition is in regard to exactly folk culture. They used, for example, ethnographic surveys, expeditions. They went to the villages. Mostly the reason for this was the administration demands to do this. And they collected the songs to make jazz compositions from them and use them for like the lyrics were used. Yes, it's really Belarusian folklore songs that were collected by Belarusian ethnographers in the 1920s, sometimes later. And it was mostly non-important for listeners as well. No one was like finding too much sense in it just from lyrics. It was like the whole arrangement of this interesting novel music. And but the Soviet journalists are and administration very insisted that's the Belarusian folk music. And maybe that's like the first implication for Belarusian people. Later, especially like I would say like like more or less 90s, I would say, when it was already more or less forgotten, people started to believe that Belarusian folk culture is something like that. That Pisneri are really represent how grandmothers sung in villages. And for example, like in the 70s, there was enough opposition in this, like in philharmonic and musical community. People who were really dealing with folk were saying, no, that's pop music. It's not folk music in any dimension. It cannot be. And like matter as like the senior composers from Belarus, they were disregarding Pisneri for violating folk music. But then it was like collapsed into this slightly sometimes kitschy image of Belarusian folk. And on the other hand, the implication, I would say, would be the understanding of distinct Belarusian identity. Because, but this distinct Belarusian identity was not based on this ethnic markers, as by every nationality of the any Soviet states aside from Russia, I think. They all were based on this ethnic traditional culture. And Pisneri were presenting Belarusian culture and giving this feeling of something that is distinct from any other Soviet example. Maybe like I'll stop here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I can also agree with your comment. Definitely, Tsoi's death helped, if it's possible to call it like that, to make him common, something common. But it works for two sides. On the one hand, people who listen to his music, and again, I say fandom, but I should be more critical because there are different communities, you're definitely right, of different generations, locally based in different places, in different national and linguistic contexts as well. But it also works for this pro-state appropriation, neutralization. I don't know. Both process could be observed here. And again, I was really I was not surprised, but I was surprised actually when I saw on this opening of this exhibition, Tsoi, the Hero's Path in Moscow in January 2022. That he was called the Cultural Code of Russia, and so this exhibition was funded both from private foundations and private foundations, because some of them preferred not to be called. His second wife, I mean Tsoi's second wife, she was not official wife, but she also gave some artifacts, some objects to exhibit for the first time in this exhibition, and they were rented. She was paid from private foundations, and the state, this Presidential Foundation of Creative Initiatives, gave like the half of the money to organize this exhibition. And if you go to the documentation of this, it was a grant. They received grant to organize this exhibition. The documentation says that Tsoi is something that everybody was someone that everybody knows. Really, a lot of people listen to his music, and so the idea was that nobody asked about the real meaning of his songs, but everybody knows him. Everybody I don't know, it was the first love or the first song played on a guitar. It was a Tsoi song, like the first kiss, the first love, and so on and so forth. This is something in common for many generations of people. And the position of his family, and now only his son, alive, and his father alive, and the other participants of the band Kino, who stay silent regarding this, really helps, unfortunately, to this process of this neutralization and appropriation of Tsoi that could be made by different agents. Of course, in Russia, state agents, I cannot say they're definitely more powerful, but again, this oppositional movement, they also try to use it many times in different, not only in different contexts, not only in Moscow, but in local contexts as well. And the fact that Tsoi is dead, not alive but dead, and nobody really contest and claim his legacy in not asking questions about the meaning of his songs and his music, his lyrics, and so on and so forth, influences this common, something in common, being something in common. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we have a question in chat. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can read it. Yeah, for recording. Yeah, it's question from Irina Zhitnikova, and I think it's for both of you. Are there any other singers or bands whose legacy has lasted and been used today? For example, if singers have left the country, could the inheritances have the same effect as those mentioned by you today? So.
Yes, it's a very good question, because I usually ask this question: is there someone comparable to Tsoi in terms of scale, in terms of popularity, and how to say it, people love and devotion? And usually Tsoi was compared to Vladimir Vysotsky and is compared to Vladimir Vysotsky, but in terms of recent political transformations and ongoing war in Ukraine, as far as I know, nothing was done in terms of his legacy to reflect contemporary events, contemporary situation, if it's again possible to call it like that. Vysotsky, it's very interesting maybe to observe Vysotsky in local context, in Yekaterinburg especially, and not only, but in Yekaterinburg there is a Vysotsky private Vysotsky museum sponsored by local businessmen, and the building named after Vysotsky. But it's, I mean, the scale of this fund-driven and not always fund-driven initiatives is not comparable to Tsoi, because Tsoi is bigger, if it's possible to say it. And unfortunately, I know nothing about some other musicians that could be compared to Tsoi in, how to say it, in post-Soviet context, and after these several waves of political transformations.
Maybe just Yegor Letov. Sorry for reading. Yeah, because this year I read this comment from Vitaly Milonov, one of the deputies from St. Petersburg, and he said that Letov is our heritage also. So we can see the similar processes, but the situation with Letov is more complex.
Yeah, because there are relatives, his wife, who keeps archive and heritage, his legacy. Yeah, but again, it would be interesting maybe to compare in terms of people who left the country, if they use his music for some purposes. Really, I know nothing about it, but yeah, I definitely agree that Letov could be this figure.
Yeah, for Belarus answers, I would say there is no other musicians who are this contested. because for several reasons. First of all, there are some musicians whose heritage is very respected in particular communities. For example, like all the independent scene from the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, it's usually not well known, but there is like this underground Belarusian scene of rock scene. First of all, most of them are alive and they're preserving their legacy themselves. And also like they are also exiled and they give concerts in exile and so on. And they like keep the community around them. And but there is it's just very difficult to have institutionalized preservation of heritage. And of course, like the state is not interested in them because they were independent in the way of like not supporting the government. On all the Soviet years, others aside from Pisneri, they are not contested by like any opposition to the regime. They are very incorporated into the state mechanism of cultural propaganda. I don't know how to say it exactly. So if they need to perform at the president's birthday, they will. And they will invoke the Soviet nostalgia, and their songs will be used for this, for like populism aims, I would say. But it is not, their legacy is not institutionalized as well. So like they are used and the songs are used, but it is not considered to be exactly heritage, which signifies something for the whole Belarusian nation, the way how Pisneri is used.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we have one more question online. Christina, please.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I enjoyed very much. My question to both of you, Alexandra and Lizaveta. To Lizaveta, I would like to ask about the historical part of your research, especially on this, how the origin of these instrumental ensembles, because in my case, I'm from Kazakhstan, and for me in Central Asia, I immediately record about Yala and the Dosmukasan, and I'm interested about this the state maybe role in the creating of these ensembles, and what was maybe the need of the time to create these bands. And the question to Alexandra, it's about the museification process of the Tsoi and about the museums. You said that there is one museum that was initially created by the fan community and the objects. Could you tell more about this in the detail? If it's changed over the time or not, the concept of the museum? Because I was also impressed how the Tsoi was appropriated by the state. And whether this museum was in relation with this state exhibition about the Tsoi is the hero, and how it may be the reaction. So about these things. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. It's a very interesting question because I'm also like there is not enough, but there is starting research on Central Asian vias more than on Belarusian, and it's interesting to compare. In what I know, the Soviet Union was not involved in the original, into initial creation of vocal instrumental ensembles. I don't know how it's in case of every band, but most of them, from what I see from the sources, were amateur bands that somewhere like 1967, 1968, it's these years where the amateur bands could find employment in philharmonics to play this like Beatles-like music. So the main event, the consequence, the order of the event was, first of all, 1964, Hard Day's Night. Beatles album gets into Soviet Union through different channels and causes the same Beatlemania as was already raging in Britain and the USA and all over Europe. And people start taking guitars and playing some Beatles music, and then they are learning that they can do even more. And then some of them get employed. They actually pursue the only way of musical career that was possible at the Soviet Union at the time. It is to be employed at the Philharmonics or like a house of culture or any kind of institution, and to receive salary. And yeah, there is administration. Administration has demands and controls the process, but still you can be a professional musician like that. And somewhere around 1970, 1971, the Soviet administration realizes that it is youth culture. That it is not just like sporadically existing bands, that the bands at the Philharmonics, they are like more or less random, they are sporadic, but there is a huge movement of people who want to play together because the Beatles is a band. It's not, and it is like previously on the Soviet estrada, it was mostly, before Edita Piaf and Druzhba, it was mostly individuals, and the band was in the background accompanying. And 71, for example, in Pisniri history, it's the all-union competition of performing artists, and there they were performing as a collective, as a band. And it was maybe one of the first times when like Belarusian administration said, okay, bands can exist, but they were still very skeptical about this, because they would prefer to send classical Soviet convention, single performer with a band in the background. And after the great success of Pisneri, the Philharmonic say, okay, we support the band. You can play as VIA. And it happened in different points with different bands, but more or less the state co-opted them and started supporting them and promoting VIAs and creating infrastructure for them in the beginning of 70s in order to more or less harness this youth culture.
Yeah, as for the museum, I'll try to be short because, yeah, I know that we do not have much time. So it's actually, it's hardly could be called like a museum. So it's officially Kamchatka in St. Petersburg. This is the place where Tsoi worked. It's a boiler room, so it's in the basement of the house with I don't know how many. I do not remember how many stores there, but it's a rather old house with this boiler room that used to be a boiler room in the basement, and it was operated during the whole 90s and only in early 2000s this boiler room was closed because of the reconstruction of the building. I mean the communication system and everything inside in the building. And after that, because it was negotiations to demolish this building, again, when I say rock community, it should be clarified. Some people who kept personal belongings, Tsoi personal belongings, like his some documents related to his salary when he worked in this boiler room, some his paintings, and on the one hand, on the other hand, community around this art cluster museum Pushkinskaya 10, also very well known in St. Petersburg for some initiatives. And now they keep the other museum devoted not to Tsoi but to Leningrad rock music, operated by Vladimir Rekshan, one of the, how to say it, representatives of this rock community from the rock bands in Petersburg from the late 80s, I mean. But in Kamchatka, again, it hardly could be called a museum because there are no collections. There are only some personal things from the late Soviet time, like the cassette player or some vinyl or some other cassettes that people just brought there to fulfill the exhibition, if it again possible to call it like that, just to prove that this initiative of people who try to protect Kamchatka from demolition, that they have something to exhibit there, to represent there. But the main idea to keep this place, because it's auratic in Benjamin understanding, yeah, it's closely connected to Tsoi biography, because he worked there, he rehearsed there, a lot of concerts took place there. Like kvartirniki, but in the basement, not in the flat, but in the basement. And there are no navigation. It's a rather small place, so you come in and you see some posters, some paintings, some other things on the one hand. On the other hand, there is bar, because it's actually it's a rock club, and there are a lot of concerts with cover bands take place there. You can order wine or beer and listen to music, or just to see some things related to late Soviet time. Yes, so there is nothing about history of rock music, nothing about Tsoi himself. I mean, nothing written about, but you can navigate by your own, or you can talk to barman or barwoman, as I did a couple of times, and they will tell you about these things, stories behind these things, but it's not explicitly exhibited there in this space. And the same situation with this museum of Leningrad Rock Club on Pushkinskaya 10, because it's also a personal collection of Vladimir Rikshan. Initially, it was the idea to exhibit something related to Leningrad Rock Club, and it was an exhibition before the pandemic. And just after the pandemic, they decided to keep this exhibition not temporal but permanent, and they opened, but it's very strong word for this for this action, this exhibition as a museum, and. In both terms, in both cases, Kamchatka and Museum of Leningrad Rock Club, they were not connected to this big exhibition in Russian Museum, because it was initiative of photographers. So I mean that community more or less the same, but the guy who initiated this exhibition of photos, Vladimir Vasily Baranovsky, one of the people who made photos from rehearsals, from concerts in mid 80s and in late 80s, and he keeps a really huge archive. And he is in touch, as far as I know from publications, with Jana Stingray and some other guys, and he invited them to exhibit their own photos in Russian Museum in 2021. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So,
yeah, I guess we do not have time at all.
Yeah,
it
I
was
think
more than
it
2
is the
hours.
time. Yeah.
Fine.
Thank you very much for all of you. Thank you very much to our speakers. It was absolutely fantastic and really very, very interesting. And I think the discussions was very fruitful. Thank you. And
Thank you.
hopefully we can see you next time also for our next seminar. And now I say goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.